All right, so again, Aftab Siddiqui. I work for Internet Society. I call myself as an accidental data analyst. I never did it in the past. I was a network engineer all my life, but then I end up doing this. So sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes you go in a rabbit hole and you say, damn it, there's nothing interesting about it. And that's how my life is for the last year and a half. So I just want to share a few things with you, what I have found. You may find something very interesting, and something you say, yep, that was good 5 minutes of nothing. So ISOC launched a product called Pulse. It was initially mostly for the journalist to see what is happening on the internet. Very simple, collecting data set from different sources. Then they said, well, make it more meaningful. So I ended up working with the team and said, well, we can generate some of the data set ourselves. So why we are just getting it from outside? And we can make it more meaningful. So we created a small team of, we call it the ISOC research. And I'm the only one who has no PhD in it. We have 2 PhDs, and I'm one with just a normal engineering degree. So I'm going to share things which are not visible on the Pulse platform. You can't, right now, don't see that. Something interesting. So let's say, so the first thing which we encountered when we were looking into, when you are stuck with 2 PhDs, they talk about biases and all these theoretical things. And I said, OK, fine, just give me some concrete things. So we stuck with 2 things. One is the interpretation bias, and the second one is the presentation bias. They are very obvious, right? So when somebody show you a diagram and try to explain it, and that's the interpretation bias. They're giving you a view which they believe is true. Nothing wrong with that. That's pretty obvious. Sometimes I show you a graph, and then it's up to you to make up your mind that what that graph shows. That's the presentation bias. So we are looking at the presentation bias today in this slide deck, right? So let's start with some interesting facts. So there are 2 representation. One is showing you on your left side is the APNIC Resource Explorer. It says that there are 3,876 ASNs allocated to Australian networks. And on the right side, it's RIPE stats. It says there are 2,941 ASNs, and out of those, only 1,700 are active. So which one is telling you the truth? Well, the reality is both are telling you the truth. On the left side, it's just an incremental one. They never removed any number. So if somebody got an ASN in 2005, and of course that company is closed, they never removed it. So it's just incremental. So it says, well, there are 3,800, but actually they are not. There are only 2,941. And we move forward a little bit, and we said, OK, fine, let me find the real number from the delegation file. Delegation file is provided by every RIR and APNIC in our region. And you can look it up. They update it on daily basis. So you can do a simple curl command and say, OK, fine. So if I do it right now, you'll see a number. That number changes every day. But the number shows 2,901. So what happened to the other 40-odd ASNs? You do it with every RIR. And then you will find that some Australian networks are using resources from other RIRs. So not a single output in 2 slide decks is giving you a wrong data set. It is just giving you a different data set, so you have to make up your own mind at what you are looking at it. So yes, all the delegations for RIR give you a real number, which is 2,940. And I made this slide deck in a passage of 6-7 days, and every day there was a difference of 2 to 3 network. And at one point I said, OK, fine, just leave it there. I'll live with the delta of 2 or 3, 1. So just mind with that. So first thing we're going to look at it is the upstream diversity, that how many Upstream providers are there. We know now like 1,700 odd networks who are actively running. How many of them are actually providing you the services or internet services, as you call it, upstream or the transit? So here, I mean, I've been working in this industry, in the Australian ecosystem for the last 11 years. And I find it that it's very easy to start an ISP. Anybody can do it, of course, if you can deal with NBN. But yes, you can provide the services. It's much easier. But is it working? Do we have a lot of transit providers in the industry or not? Well, out of those 1,700 odd networks which are active on the routing table, around 1,000 of them, 900 I'd say, have only one transit provider. So they are just hanging off one transit link. There's a small graph which says 47. Out of those 900, 47 of them are listed on peering DB. I can't verify them through routing table. I looked it up in the route views, I looked it up on the RIPE-stat, but I can't verify them. But I just listed them because they shows up on peering DB. Peering DB is just a database, by the way. So it's not absolutely 100% sure that whether they are part of any route, IX or not. But still, if you minus them, you have more than 850 networks who are using single transit provider. And around 420 of them are using two, and so on and so forth. So who are they actually relying on? If there are thousands of, up to 1,000 of networks who just use one transit provider, who they rely on? The most prominent one is for those who have only one transit link, they rely on Vocus. And the second one is 7545, and you know what happened with 7545 quite recently. So is it good, bad? I don't know. I leave that perception bias to you. I'm not making a decision. But yeah, that's interesting. A lot of network, we have a lot of transit availability, but still networks decided to rely on only one transit. Maybe they have dual links, they have passive connectivity, which is much more reliable, so they decided to rely on one. That is fine, not judging on that. But when I see this diagram, I see Phil wearing a three-piece suit in front of the Senate committee, just in case if something goes down. So, and of course, that can be problematic. So I would say if you are one of those networks, maybe try to do a little bit diversifying your connectivity. So who are they relying on if they have two transit link or three transit link? When again, Vocus pops up on the top. And then you can see that it becomes a bigger bottleneck, that one ASN is predominant in terms of the enterprise connectivity within Australia. So there's a mix that it dilutes quite quickly after the first 2-3 big networks. And then, of course, the market is shared between smaller operators moving forward. So what does it show? One thing is a lot of our networks in Australia are not connected to IXs, even though we have one of the best, or I would say vibrant, peering and interconnect system available. Much easier, much, I would say, cheaper, and it's all mostly operated by the local community, whether it is Edge IX, IX Australia, Megaport, Equinix. It's very, very vibrant. So, but why they are not connecting to it? Is it too expensive? Not easy accessible, or something, or above all? There are, if you look at, when I say 371 Australian networks are connected to the IXs, so it's based on the peering DB data, because not everyone share their routing dump publicly. So it's based on peering DB data. You can add 10, 15 more, or minus some networks out of it. So if you are relying on very few networks, are they protecting you? Are they doing route origin validation? When the answer is yes, most of them, most of the bigger operators are doing route origin validation. So you can relax at least on that side, that they're going to protect you if there is a problem. Now, next point is the IPv6 adoption. How are we doing in terms of the IPv6 adoption in the country? Again, for that, you need to look at how do you measure that. So there are multiple organizations who are doing the IPv6 adoption. And so I listed all 4 of them. One is the Akamai Internet Station. They says in Australia, it is 26.9% IPv6 adoption. If you look at APNIC Labs, that is around 43%. If you look at Cloudflare Radar, that says around 26.7%. And if you look at the Google IPv6 stats, it says around 31.22%. So that's a summary. Which one is telling you the truth? Which number is right? Are we doing good? Are we doing not good or bad? So the answer is all of them are telling you the truth. It's the way they are measuring it. It's different for every organization, how they measure it. And it's mostly based on how they are seeing the traffic. So if APNIC Labs is looking at one of the pixels on IPv6 and they said that's 43.x%, then that's the truth. It's not, they're not making up any number. None of them are making any number. So then we need to figure out that actually what is happening on the IPv6 space. So one picture is very interesting from the Cloud Radar data, the Cloudflare Radar data. You look at these valleys, and it happens on every weekend, that IPv6 usage in Australia increases over the weekend, and it's every weekend. You can go back almost 3 years. And there's a delta is around 5 to 7% at times, and at times it goes up to 10%, as per the Cloudflare Radar data. And I was quite interested to figure out what is happening. Then I looked up AS1221, and you can see the difference. Every weekend, people are at home using Telstra, which is IPv6 enabled, and the traffic on IPv6 goes up. So if you say that IPv6 in Australia is doing good, well, you can thank AS1221 for that. So are they the only one? Well, not, of course. There are many other operators who are doing IPv6. So just look at who else is doing it. Oh, yeah, they are there at the bottom. So some of them are doing it. So, but are they making any difference? Of course, Telstra is making a biggest difference. So one thing I want to go back a step and say, okay, fine, who is actually announcing it? But then I found out that out of so many networks, there are many networks, as I said, 2,900 networks, around 800 of them are inactive. And they are inactive, they're not announcing anything, they're not in the global routing table. There are 1,700 networks who are active, but they're not announcing a single IPv6 address space. They have it, all of them, because IPNIC gave them for free, but they are not announcing it. So who's announcing it? So there are some who are only announcing IPv6. Not many, 27 of them. So they only do IPv6. I have one of those ASNs, so I'm not making any difference. It's a house network. But yeah, there are a few who are only announcing IPv6. So 27 are only doing IPv6, 390 are doing IPv4 and IPv6, and the remaining are not doing anything related to IPv6. So the whole Australian IPv6 adoption or traffic is based on these 400-something networks. So who are they relying, who is responsible for the IPv6 adoption percentage in Australia? Here's the list. It is based on Jeff's measurement. APNIC labs, because that's the more accurate, I would say, the more generous IPv6 measurement, which give you that how many, it gives you a sample rate. So I picked up anything which was more than 10%. And here's the list. So I would say anything with it more than 25% is actually helping increase the IPv6 adoption in the country. Anybody else trying their best, but of course they can do probably a little bit better. Some are providing the IPv6 services, but probably they are enterprise networks, so they don't have that many networks or users in the networks to make a difference in terms of measurements. So I'm not blaming them, but of course they can't be listed here in that sense. From the number of user perspective, these are the one which shows up quite consistently. So that was the IPv6 adoption. I mean, so one thing I would like to say that, are we doing good in the IPv6 adoption? My perspective is, no, we are not. There's a lot of room for improvement. A lot of networks are actually not even announcing it. So maybe there is something wrong. We assumed that IPv6 is 43, 44, 45% doing in Australia. Well, we need to correct. Now moving towards the DNS diversity. This is one thing, so anything I measure here, I do it on a global level. So something very, very interesting outside Australia. So I'll explain that why it is important. So yeah, I mean, we didn't find anything in Australia, by the way, just to be clear. So just to clarify that why it is important. It is important to measure what people are using as a DNS service. For Australia, yes, probably not. But we have seen that there's a great correlation between how open the internet is in the economy versus what people are using as a DNS service. If there's a lot of restrictions are there in a country where they are using internet, they are most likely to use public DNS. And if in a country like Australia, we don't have a lot of restrictions, people just use whatever DNS provided by their service provider. And that's what we do. We send every day 1,000, not 10,000, 1,000 requests for the DNS queries. So we have a domain which, and we send a request for that for the DNS query. It doesn't generate any HTTP request, only for the DNS query. So it doesn't take any of your data. So don't worry about that. Predominantly in Australia, we found that if people are using third-party DNS, it turns out that it is 1.1.1. Why? We don't know the reason. But out of 10,000 requests, only 1,500 of them came out as Cloudflare 1.1. Then we looked up all those requests on the basis of where they are geolocated using the geolocation services, MaxMind and IPinfo together. And of course, even with the third-party DNS service people are using in Australia, most of them are hosted in Australia. Some, of course, are as far as in Finland, which was only 1 out of 10,000. I would say it's just an anomaly. Or maybe somebody is using their office network here and never changed their DNS. So it is, in that sense, we did not find anything interesting. But if you look at other countries in Asia-Pacific region, you will see the graph is absolutely upside down. People do not use their ISP-provided DNS. They use public DNS to circumvent a lot of restrictions. But luckily, this doesn't happen in Australia and New Zealand. The other problem we saw is, OK, fine, you're using ISP DNS. Are those DNSs covered by a valid ROA? So only, 19% of them are not covered by a ROA. A big portion of them are actually covered by a ROA. So who are not covered by ROAs? Here's the list. So if you're running one of these DNS servers or resolvers, it would be a good idea to create a ROA for that, and just to make sure that nobody can hijack your DNS. I mean, yes, it is inside your network. It is really hard, but still, you never know. It's just a one click, and then it will be clear. So in that sense, yes, we did not find anything which is problematic, at least for Australia. I'll be publishing this data globally. We will be publishing this data globally on the Pulse platform, so you can compare it in Q4 to check how other countries are doing it. So another portion which we measure quite extensively is where is the content, how far the content is, how you are accessing it. So we use a data set called Tranco. It's freely available. You can access it as well. It's based on multiple services, Google Crux, Cloudflare Radar, Farsight, Majestic, and Cisco Umbrella. It lists down the top. It provides 1 million daily top 1 million websites or domains, which they believe is the top 1 million websites for the day. And they also provide it for per country, but that is for on the basis of Google Crux 1,000 only. So we looked at the .au ccTLD, that where these are hosted, because then you can look at the edu, .gov, and also .au is predominantly used in Australia. So content locality, so we looked at, so this is, I'm not sure if you have used it before. It is called Find CDN. This software was made by CISA, the US government cybersecurity agency. So we forked it. We have made a lot of changes in it, and we are trying to send a pull request, which has not been accepted yet. You can have a look. You can go to the GitHub. It's publicly available. If you'd like to have make some changes in it, we would really like to learn more from it. So it looks up all the domains. So we fed around 17,000 odd domains and see where they are hosted. So around 16,000 of them, yes, found that they are hosted on one of the CDNs. And of course, around 1,400 of them with multiple CDNs. Of course, Cloudflare comes out on the top, maybe because they provide a free service as well. So that is predominant in the market, at least in Australia, and not just in Australia. We found the similar scenario in Southeast Asia as well, that Cloudflare comes up on the top quite predominantly. Then it goes back to Amazon. If you look at the list, I mean, between Amazon and Cloudflare, it's the biggest market share they share between each other. And then it goes down to many other providers. Then, of course, not everyone is hosting it on a CDN. So where are they hosting it if it's not a CDN? So it gives you a list that, okay, fine, it is on CDN or it's not on CDN. Then you look up that who are the non-CDN providers. So in that sense, Synergy Wholesale comes up as a top one, that most of the people who actually buy the domains from them and try to host it with them as well. But it's a long list, and in Australia there are many. People are using many other hosting provider. Good, bad. It's not. We are not judging them. It's just a choice. It's a business choice. They want to have it here, outside Australia, or with any provider. Most .gov.au. So we looked up where they are. If they are not on CDN, then they are just on an EC2 instance on Amazon. Then they goes into the Microsoft Azure. So they are predominantly in Amazon. If it is a .gov website, then of course it will be in Amazon. Content locality for the .gov.au, are they covered by RPKI? Yes, most of them. 15% are not. I listed down that if it is .gov.au and it is on Macquarie, it is not covered by ROA. So if somebody from a query here, maybe it's again a quick fix. So what are the limitations in the data set? We pull data set from, as I said, from multiple sources. Most of it is based on raw data set from route views and RIPE stat. So we try to make as meaningful as possible, but if you find something which is not right, if you have found something which was not right, I would really like to understand and make it better. Everything we do is available on the ISOC Research GitHub repository with all the details. Please have a look, provide feedback, and if you want to fix something, happy to accept the pull request. That's all from my end. I have taken all the time. For any question, you can find me.